Welcome back to the Truth Factory. I want to talk about the huge voting scandal going on right now in Broward County, centered around the midterm elections. Broward County officials have once again majorly monkeyed this up. But that shouldn't be surprising if you know anything about Broward County. So before we dive deeper into the current voting scandal, for some context, let's review this county's history of gross incompetence and complete corruption. Just some of the scandals that have happened here are confiscated drugs going mysteriously missing, falsified drug lab and DNA reports, falsifying crime stats, bribery and extortion, multiple sheriff deputies being caught in prostitution stings, the public health system CEO killing himself in 2016 during a federal investigation into contract fraud, and the Broward County education system has also been caught up in multiple lawsuits and scandals over the years. And then there's Broward County's crooked Democrat stooge Sheriff Israel, who's been caught in the past illegally taking thousands of dollars as gifts from donors. He was also the sheriff on the scene during the Fort Lauderdale airport shooting, as well as the Marjory Stoneman Douglas shooting, which he majorly botched. And then he used this as a platform to push gun control and blame the NRA rather than his own disgusting incompetence, based on 39 previous emergency calls over a 7-year period about the Stoneman Douglas shooter. If anyone could have done more to prevent this bloodshed, it was Sheriff Israel himself. And recently, Israel's name popped up in the news again when he was investigating the fake pipe bombs that were sent through Broward County's post office 2 weeks before midterms. There's still no explanation of how these packages were mailed with the incorrect amount of stamps and why the stamps weren't canceled. Yet we're somehow just supposed to believe that despite those issues, 10 of these packages that are textbook examples of what a mail bomb looks like made it across multiple state lines, passing through several employees' hands to be delivered to some of the highest ranking officials in America without anyone batting an eye? And we're also supposed to believe that this homeless Filipino stripper who drove a Trump meme van and spelled Florida wrong on every single package was able to logistically pull that off all by himself? Now I can definitely believe that someone unhinged like Caesar Sayak made these bombs, since there isn't even a circuit here and the clock isn't attached to anything. 14 pork wieners attached together with a Ninja Turtles watch would have been as effective. These homemade 4chan bombs would also have been just as effective. But I do find it hard to believe that those extremely suspicious looking packages were not immediately flagged at the post office and that Sheriff Israel wasn't called in to investigate them. But yet, they somehow made it to their intended destinations, so draw your own conclusions. But the corruption doesn't end here, because Broward County's rep is none other than troll in human form Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who's also very experienced in election fraud because she's most known for stealing the primaries for Hillary Clinton and sabotaging Bernie Sanders in the process. But corruption in Broward County isn't new. It goes all the way back to its namesake, Florida Governor Napoleon Broward. He was a swaggering, racist riverboat captain who helped get guns and ammo to Cuban fighters during the Spanish-American War, and then won an election in Florida promising to literally drain the swamp. And while he may have successfully drained parts of the Everglade, Broward County is still full of swamp creatures to this day, and the only thing that's being drained now is its democracy. It's full to the brim with corruption and incompetency, most notably multiple election disasters. We're talking every election since George Bush. Here's the timeline. 2000. George Bush faced off against Al Gore. The Gore campaign asked for a hand recount of 4 Florida counties because of irregularities, Broward being one of them. The Supreme Court eventually ruled in favor of Bush, but Broward's election troubles were just beginning. 2001, Miriam Oliphant was elected supervisor of elections for Broward County, and one of the first things that she did was fire most of the experienced staff members and then replaced them with all of her black and less experienced friends and gave them significantly higher pay rates. She also hired a perpetually drunk homeless man named Glenn Davis. Miriam quickly went over budget by $1 million, which caused them to have no money left to pay election workers. Because of this, in 2002, The primary election in the county was a disaster, with broken voting machines, inaccurate registration information, thousands of uncounted ballots, and no-show poll workers. Also, it was later found out that that homeless man that she hired hid 300 ballots in a filing cabinet and then was awarded a $5,000 raise. In 2003, more than 17,000 mail-in votes were returned as undeliverable, and low-energy Jeb Bush eventually suspended Miriam for incompetency, but then replaced her with Democrat Brenda Snipes, who looks like the guy from Indiana Jones' Temple of Doom who eats monkey brains. So how is Brenda Snipes doing? Really, really badly. Issues under her leadership include recounts, long lines, and legal disputes in multiple elections. And while we can assume that Cheeteljuice must be trying to use her job to help Democrats win, she's so incompetent it's really hard to know what she's trying to do besides destroy Florida's faith in democracy. In 2004, this Yoda lookalike announced that 58,000 absentee ballots got misplaced in the mail, and then sent out replacement ballots too late to be counted. In 2006, more disasters ensued, as in 2008 and in 2012, over 1,000 uncounted ballots were mysteriously found a week after the election results had been announced. In 2016, the primary race between Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Tim Canova were majorly botched. Not only were the results illegally posted on their website before the polls even closed, but a court declared that Snipes broke election laws by destroying subpoenaed ballots that were considered evidence in an investigation. And instead of owning up to destroying these ballots, she blamed it on her staff for giving her the wrong folders filled with information. Whatever the hell that means. And now in 2018, Broward County is shining once again. On election night, Governor Rick Scott had a lead over incumbent Senator Bill Nelson for the Senate seat by about 15,000 votes. But since then, somehow a constant stream of uncounted ballots were mysteriously found in Democrat-leaning counties, including Broward. And this began to chip away at Scott's lead, including a teacher who just happened to stumble upon a random box of ballots and immediately called and told her good friend Florida Representative Shervin Jones, who just happens to be good friends with the losing Democratic candidate, Andrew Gillum. Also, an undisclosed amount of uncounted ballots were magically found at the very same post office the mega bomber used. When the same place is involved in two back-to-back scandals, it gets a little suspicious. Speaking of suspicious, there was also a random box found at the Fort Lauderdale airport. The airport was locked down as a bomb threat, but witnesses who saw the box say that it had the word provisional on it. And it was found in the trunk of a vehicle that was last driven by a Broward County employee. And if that's not bad enough for you, a staff member signed an affidavit stating that they witnessed election employees filling out blank ballots, and when they reported this, they were fired and told not to come back. And all of these new ballots happen to trigger a statewide recount to challenge both the declared Republican winners, Governor Rick Scott and Senator-elect Ron DeSantis. Also, the Florida Democratic Party took a list of people who had their ballots rejected and sent them a notice in the mail to fix the problem. However, instead of sending them the official notice, they doctored it with a later deadline. So most people reading the form were likely to send their paperwork in too late. That is actual election manipulation and voter fraud. But speaking of fraud, during the recount, Rick Scott would have had a net gain of 779 votes in Broward County. However, Brenda Snipes conveniently missed the deadline by 2 minutes, making its machine recount tally void. And the court ruled that they'd use the old count, meaning that the recount was useless, making it appear that Snipes intentionally submitted late results so that they would be invalidated. But according to MSNBC, questioning her incompetency and motive is racist because she happens to be black.
Here is the way they are treating Brenda Snipes, who is the longtime election supervisor there, who, by the way, is an older black woman in the Deep South. Okay, just keep that in mind.
But I'm not judging her because she's black. I'm judging her because she's an incompetent, cheating, corrupt, lying Democrat who needs to resign or be fired like her predecessor. It also now appears that during a count for Florida's Commissioner of Agriculture, lawyers found thousands of overlapping ballots from the Senate race that got mixed in, which could have caused the same ballots to be counted twice. This whole thing is a circus. However, as votes are recounted, it looks like Rick Scott will remain the clear victor, and Andrew Gillum has finally conceded to DeSantis, making him not just a loser one time, but twice. This entire process was a giant waste of time and money and just further exposed the ridiculous national disgrace that is Broward County. They're a slap in the face to the Republic and to free and fair elections. The latest recount scandal is the straw that broke the camel's back, and it's time to call out the corrupt politicians and officials running Broward into the ground and not give them another inch. Broward County is like a microcosm of the Democrat Party as a whole, corrupt, shameless, connected in high places, and yet somehow still completely, tragically, and hilariously incompetent. If there's a way to screw things up, count on Broward County to get the job done, and then some. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that bell if you haven't, and thank you so much to my patrons. Have a great night. Meow.